Do you know why most people never reach real wealth? It is not because they are lazy, and it is not because they lack intelligence. It is not even because life dealt them the wrong circumstances. The truth is much more unsettling than that. In most cases, people fail financially because the place where their prosperity is hidden is the exact place they never think to look. That is the core idea I want to unpack for you. My background comes from decades of studying the Talmud, the Kabbalistic teachings, and the ancient financial traditions that have been preserved within Jewish scholarship for thousands of years. I was raised in a lineage where this knowledge was not casual information, but something carefully protected and passed down. What I am sharing here is not motivation or surface-level inspiration. It is a structured understanding of how wealth is believed to operate on a deeper, almost hidden level, according to those ancient teachings, and why most people completely miss it in their daily lives. I still remember being 23 years old, freshly finished with my rabbinical studies, and completely broke. Not slightly struggling, but genuinely unable to keep up with basic living costs. I could not pay rent properly, I could not afford simple moments with my wife, and I felt a deep embarrassment because I had spent years studying wisdom, yet could not manage my own financial reality. One evening after Shabbat, my grandfather called me into his study. It was a small room filled wall to wall with old books, the smell of worn pages and wax in the air. He looked at me calmly and said something I misunderstood at first. He told me that the reason I had no money was because I was looking for money in the wrong way. He said I should stop chasing money directly and instead search for the place where it is hidden. I assumed it was poetic language, but over time I realized he was pointing me toward a principle deeply rooted in Talmudic thought about how provision is structured and placed in life. Over the following weeks, he continued teaching me ideas that completely changed how I understood wealth. According to what he showed me, prosperity is never random or accidental. It is not scattered blindly. It is placed with intention, and finding it requires alignment with certain principles rather than constant pursuit. I eventually gathered these teachings into a structured system that I later documented in what I call my work on ancient wealth principles, outlining 10 core ideas along with practices and reflections drawn from those traditions. When I first applied them, I did not expect much change, but within months, my financial situation shifted in ways I could not logically explain. Opportunities appeared unexpectedly. Money came from directions I was not actively pursuing, and doors opened without force or struggle. That experience convinced me this was not just theory, but something I had to take seriously as a working framework for understanding wealth. Today, I see the same pattern repeating in most people's lives. They are working hard, following advice, studying, building careers, or trying business after business, yet still feeling stuck in the same cycle. They try budgeting, but it only helps them manage limitation, not escape it. They try positive thinking, but mindset alone cannot replace alignment with deeper principles of action and direction. They try overworking themselves, believing exhaustion will eventually turn into success. But all it usually creates is burnout and emotional distance from the life they actually want. The issue is not effort. The issue is that almost all of these strategies operate on the surface. They deal with money as something external to chase, instead of understanding the deeper structure behind how opportunity, timing, and perception actually shape financial outcomes in ways most people never consciously notice. Here is where most people misunderstand wealth at a fundamental level. They focus only on what can be seen and measured, while ignoring the unseen foundation that, according to these teachings, governs everything in the first place. In this view, wealth does not begin in physical effort or external opportunity. It begins in a deeper spiritual source and only later expresses itself in the material world. When someone operates only in the physical dimension, it becomes like trying to capture water with a net. The effort exists, but the result slips away before it can be held. Many people are raised believing that money is purely the outcome of hard work, that endless grinding and sacrifice will eventually guarantee success. But this belief leaves out a crucial layer. Effort without alignment can turn into exhaustion instead of progress. Even the ideas shared through the framework point back to this same principle being passed down and studied across generations, now reshaped into lessons people are beginning to reconsider in their own lives. The deeper teaching speaks about a hidden system behind provision itself. According to these texts, sustenance is not distributed randomly or left to chance, but guided through spiritual principles that most people never become aware of. Every person is said to have a form of designated provision, yet it is not openly visible. Ancient sources describe this as a hidden treasury, a kind of stored potential that exists beyond the physical world before it ever becomes reality. Most people never access it because they keep repeating the same visible patterns everyone else follows. They compete in crowded spaces, copy familiar strategies, and chase the same limited opportunities. But within this perspective, what is meant for you is often placed outside those obvious paths. It is positioned in areas the ego overlooks or rejects, which is exactly why so many people miss it entirely. This is why preparation and inner state are considered essential in this practice. It is not something that can be approached casually, while distracted or mentally scattered, and still be expected to produce any meaningful shift. The recommended time is in the quiet hours before sunrise, when external noise is low and awareness feels clearer. The process begins with stillness, allowing the mind to settle without force or pressure. During this phase, thoughts about stress, money and survival are intentionally released, even if only temporarily, to create mental space. From there, intention becomes central. Instead of vague wishing, the focus shifts toward clarity and openness, acknowledging that provision is already designated and the individual is aligning themselves to receive it. The effectiveness of the practice depends on sincerity and presence, because without that inner foundation, it becomes routine thought rather than real transformation. In this understanding, the physical side of wealth is only one layer, while the deeper layer is spiritual, which most people completely overlook. According to these teachings, wealth does not begin in the visible world first. Instead, it is said to originate in a higher spiritual source, and only later becomes expressed in physical form. When someone focuses only on external effort without any inner alignment, it is compared to trying to hold water in a net. The movement is there, but nothing stays. Many people are raised with the belief that money is purely the result of hard work alone, but this perspective is considered incomplete. Hard work has value, but without inner alignment, it often leads to exhaustion rather than real progress. This is also reflected in the teachings being shared in modern interpretations of these ancient ideas passed down through generations. The deeper claim behind these traditions is that provision is guided by structured spiritual principles rather than random chance. In this view, every person has access to a designated form of sustenance, but it is not always visible in obvious places. It is often described as a hidden treasury that exists beyond the physical layer of reality before it manifests outwardly. Most people miss it because they continue following the same visible paths everyone else is on, repeating familiar patterns and competing in overcrowded spaces. From this perspective, what is meant for an individual is often placed outside those obvious roots, in areas that are easy to ignore or dismiss, which is why many never recognize it, even when opportunities appear. The process begins in a quiet, uncluttered space before sunrise, where the candle is placed at the center of a table and lit as a symbolic opening. At that moment, an intention is spoken or held inwardly, expressing readiness to connect with a deeper source of provision and clarity. Next, a glass of water is placed on the left side of the candle, reflecting the idea of receptivity and openness. A small amount of salt is then added into the water, and as it dissolves, it is used as a focus for imagining the release of financial fears, limitations, and internal resistance. After that, the coin is held in the hand as a representation of a personal seed of abundance. While holding it, a short statement of trust and release is made, acknowledging that outcomes are not controlled but received in their own timing. Next, a written statement of intention is read once and then folded carefully 3 times, a number often associated with balance and completion in mystical interpretation. It is then placed beneath the coin, symbolizing alignment between intention and the seed of potential. After this, the individual remains in silence for around 10 minutes without distraction, allowing space for reflection and inner stillness, while the candle continues to burn. Following this period, the water is poured outside the home or at the entrance, representing the release of perceived energetic blockages and the clearing of space for new flow. This concludes the practice. However, the teaching is presented as only a portion of a much larger system. The complete structure is compiled in the Ancient Wealth Code, expanding on 10 core principles and available via the link in the description for those who want to explore further. Step 8 is about completing the process correctly and allowing it to finish without interruption. Once everything has been set in motion, the candle is left to burn out naturally on its own. You do not extinguish it manually, because in this framework, the flame symbolizes the upward movement of your intention being carried beyond the physical space. If you need to leave the room, you simply ensure the candle is placed safely so it can continue burning without risk. The coin and the folded intention paper are left exactly where they were overnight and are not disturbed until the next morning. When morning comes, the coin is transferred into your wallet or kept in your pocket continuously, and it is never spent, as it is treated as an anchor to the intention you set. The folded paper is also placed inside your wallet, kept behind other items so it stays close without being constantly handled or reviewed. In the first 24 hours after completing this practice, the changes people notice are usually subtle rather than dramatic. It is often described as a quiet shift in perception, as if the mind becomes slightly clearer or less weighed down. Some people become aware of small thoughts they would normally ignore, such as ideas about opportunities or directions they had previously overlooked. Others experience unexpected conversations or minor events that seem to point toward new possibilities. There can also be a sense of lightness or internal calm that was not there before. Within this system, these early signs are understood as the initial stage of internal adjustment, where things begin to realign beneath the surface. The key instruction at this point is simply awareness, without over-interpretation, allowing events to unfold without forcing meaning onto every detail. Within 3 to 7 days, the experience is often described as becoming more noticeable in external life. This may appear as unexpected financial movement, new ideas connected to income, conversations that open doors, or situations resolving in ways that feel unplanned yet timely. Over a longer period, around 30 days, those who remain consistent may begin to feel a broader shift in their overall relationship with money, where anxiety decreases and a sense of openness or receptivity increases. The emphasis throughout is not on chasing signs or obsessing over outcomes, because that mental pressure is believed to disrupt the natural flow of the process. Instead, it is compared to planting something and allowing it to grow without repeatedly digging it up to check progress. There are also important warnings attached to this approach. The first is about intention, which is considered central to everything that follows. This practice is not meant to be driven by greed or fixation on money itself. In this perspective, abundance is viewed as a balanced and natural state, while greed is seen as an internal distortion that creates resistance. The idea is that what a person carries inwardly tends to shape what they experience outwardly. So desperation or obsessive desire is believed to interfere with alignment. When intention is instead rooted in stability, gratitude, and a balanced desire for improvement, it is considered more aligned with the purpose of the practice. The quality of intention is treated as just as important as the actions being performed. A second warning concerns secrecy during the early stage. It is strongly emphasized that the details of the practice should not be shared with others during the initial 40-day period. The reasoning given is that speaking about it too early can shift focus from internal alignment toward external validation. When attention moves outward in this way, consistency and inner clarity are believed to weaken. In contrast, keeping the process private is said to help maintain concentration and emotional steadiness. Silence is viewed as creating a protected internal space where intention can develop without interference, doubt, or outside influence disrupting the process before it stabilizes. The third warning relates to consistency and precision. This is not presented as a symbolic act done once and forgotten, but as a structured practice that gains meaning through repetition. It is often suggested that it can be repeated weekly, ideally on a consistent day, to reinforce alignment over time. Even in a single session, however, it is emphasized that every step should be followed carefully in order without skipping or altering anything. Changing materials, rearranging steps, or omitting parts is believed to weaken the overall structure. The underlying idea is that discipline and exactness reflect seriousness, and that consistency itself becomes part of what supports the process. A deeper layer of this teaching connects financial experience with personal purpose, suggesting that wealth is not separate from meaning in life, but intertwined with it. In this view, what a person receives financially is linked to the direction of their life path rather than being random or unrelated. This is why comparison with others is seen as unhelpful, because each individual is believed to have a distinct assignment and different form of provision. A teaching associated with Rabbi Nachman of Breslov expresses this idea through the concept that being jealous of someone else's success is like being upset over something that was never intended for you in the first place. The core message is that distraction through comparison pulls attention away from recognizing and aligning with one's own path. I also went through a period where I moved away from these practices in my own life. As responsibilities grew, I became more dependent on effort and personal planning alone, gradually letting go of the structure I had once followed. Over time, I noticed my financial situation becoming more unstable, even though I was working harder than before. The issue was not lack of effort, but a growing sense of disconnection from the framework I had previously relied on. When I returned to those practices with greater consistency and humility, things began to stabilize again much faster than expected. That experience reinforced a simple truth. Understanding something intellectually is not enough. Without consistent application, knowledge stays theoretical. Many people are exposed to ideas like this, but very few actually integrate them long enough for any meaningful shift to take place. Across many of the stories shared through this teaching, the pattern described is consistent. People who felt completely blocked financially, whether through bankruptcy, stalled careers, or long-term discouragement, began noticing changes after applying the principles as instructed. Some reported new income sources appearing within a short period. Others found unexpected opportunities that matched their skills in ways they never anticipated. And some regained the motivation and means to revisit goals they had long abandoned. The central idea is not that these individuals became fundamentally different overnight, but that they stopped operating against the system described in this framework and began aligning with it instead. In that sense, what changed was not their identity, but their direction and awareness of what was already available to them. This perspective becomes especially significant when viewed in the context of the modern world. Economic conditions feel increasingly unstable for many people, with rising inflation reducing purchasing power and global markets shifting unpredictably. At the same time, rapid technological change, including artificial intelligence reshaping job structures, has created a sense of uncertainty about long-term financial security. Traditional paths that once felt reliable to previous generations no longer guarantee the same outcomes. Against this backdrop, the teaching emphasizes that external systems can shift dramatically, but certain underlying principles are described as constant. In this view, spiritual law is not affected by market cycles, political decisions, or technological disruption, and is considered unchanging across time. Bringing everything together, the message presented is built around a few core ideas. First, that wealth is understood as something placed with intention, rather than distributed randomly, and that each person's access point is not necessarily obvious or aligned with what the majority is pursuing. Second, that many people miss this access point because they keep following familiar, crowded paths instead of recognizing the unique direction assigned to them within this framework. And finally, that alignment with these principles, rather than constant external struggle alone, is presented as the key difference between persistent lack and meaningful financial movement in the direction of stability and growth. When all of this is brought together, the deeper message is not really about rituals, objects, or external steps at all. Those elements are only a language used to point towards something more fundamental. The real focus of this teaching is alignment, how a person relates to effort, intention, awareness, and the direction they believe their life is moving in. In this view, most financial struggle does not come from a lack of opportunity in the world, but from a lack of clarity in how a person is positioned toward those opportunities. People keep searching in the same visible places, repeating the same approaches, and expecting a different outcome, even while the underlying pattern never changes. The idea being presented is that when someone shifts their inner approach, their outer experience begins to reflect that shift in ways they did not previously notice.